Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, the article is Driven Away by Hate. This is a look at why HBCUs are getting so many applications these days. It's written by Ms. Greta Anderson of Inside Higher Ed. And the question this week is related to helping parents deal with the emotional side, the emotional turmoil of kids leaving for college. And our interview is with Mr. Eric Furter. He's the former executive director of undergrad admissions at Columbia, and he's also the former dean of undergrad admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's all about questions about applying to selective colleges. And our college spotlight for the week is Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And do you recognize that voice, everybody? Anika is back. Reunited, and it feels so good.
Reunited and can't talk. I'm like, I can't even read this stuff.
You're rusty. It's okay. It's great to have you back, friends. Dave is not going anywhere. He's just taking Lauren back. Frieder taking Lauren back to New Haven for college for the week. So Anika's being the designated hitter, subbing and coming back and being in the saddle in her rightful spot. So give us an update.
Just a quick saddle. Well, first of all, no updates. How about update on that awesome box that I received from all of those amazing listeners? Oh my God, that was the best surprise, best present I have ever gotten in a long time. So thank you all so much. That was so sweet.
So let me comment for people who don't know what we're talking about. So our regular listeners know we did a little surprise send off for Anika, something called an awesome box, which I highly recommend. She never knew anything about it before.
I sure haven't. That was a new one. Mm-hmm.
And so everybody went in and they gave their comments about Anika and how she had touched their lives and their photos. And then they delivered it to her. Well, what did it come in? Did it come like bound together? What did you tell me what it looked like?
And I'm staring at it across the room. It's this cute little box, has a little picture on it, has a little message on it, and it's all these really cute cards that are inserted. It's bound some kind of way where you can take the cards out and you just flip through the cards, and they're really quality hard stock too. That's what I really like about it. But yeah,
oh,
so
nice.
Cute, so nice.
So yeah, Anika called me. She was like, "Mark, this is like the best gift ever." She's like, how did you do this?
Very nice.
Because one time I made one announcement on the podcast about it because I didn't want you to hear it. And then I did have the emails from those who are podcast partners who support the podcast. So I did email them a few times. And so the people that heard that one announcement on the show, because I didn't want you to hear it. So I said, I can't announce it again.
Oh,
that has to be a surprise.
Nice. Very nice. And I'm not going to go through the whole list of names, but it was amazing. So many comments about the struggle bus. That was so awesome.
Now do you believe me that you have impact, Anika, finally?
Very, very nice. So thank you all very much. Cannot overemphasize it. Thanks. That was beautiful.
So we need an update on what you've been doing. So, because your last episode was 171 and this is now 188. That's 17 weeks. That's 5 months.
Oh God, feels like 2 weeks.
Nah, you know how life is. You know how life is. That's because you're back in your rightful saddle here in a normal place. It feels normal.
I don't know.
I don't know about that.
But no, the same old, working hard. Everybody's in school. Jalen's officially into his second year at Emory. Janaea has officially started sophomore year at A&T. They're both banging it out. And John Andrew has just started the 8th grade today. And he said it was cool. So everything's all good and just work, getting it together, and it's all good.
Well, listen, friends, I'm actually so excited for Nikki to be here. I'm not even going to I'm actually going to pass on my admissions tip, my admissions vernacular, my big number, just to chit chat with you a little more. I will make one announcement. Our survey is up. So we have a brand new survey because it's so important that we know from you any changes you want us to make, things you want us to emphasize more, and that we give the results to our interviewees, because when we've done it in the past, it's been extremely helpful. We would be most grateful if you would complete it for us and just be honest. You can skip any question you're uncomfortable with, but nobody is completely confidential. Nobody will ever see your name ever on anything. It just will show the collective results. And you get that by going to yourcollegeboundkid.com under the resources tab, and you'll see listener survey. Friends, I've got some great news. Even if your child didn't sign up for the SAT or ACT that Appleruth administered the last few weeks, Jed Appleruth and Ginger Fay are inviting all of our Your College Bound Kid listeners, as well as anyone else you refer, to attend their 1-hour question and answer session about anything and everything you want to know about the ACT, the SAT, or applying to college. Now, Ginger Fay worked in admissions at Emory and Duke and Phillips Andover, and she was also an independent college counselor. She will join Jed. At first, Jed will do a 15-minute overview of how the ACT is different from the SAT, and I promise you it will be well worth your time to attend. They will then take your questions for 45 minutes. All you need to do is once you sign in, just type your questions in the chat box. Now, if you want to attend, you're going to need to sign up. You can go to appleroot.com/calendar event types, but the easiest thing to do is just to click the link. So we've got this link in the show notes. It's a hyperlink. Take the link, put it in your browser. It'll take you right there. Go to September 8th. It's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you will see our event. Now, you're going to need to enter the following code to reserve your spot. M as in me, 457794. I'll repeat that. M as in me, 457794. Hope to see you there. So I have a question for you, Anika.
Mm-hmm.
A little birdie, and that little birdie's named Anika, told me that you might run a marathon. Talk to us about it. So you've been using your time away from the podcast to hit the running heavy again. So give us an update.
Oh, nobody wants to hear about my running, Mark.
Yes, they do, Anika. They do.
I'll give you the most interesting part. I have knocked a whole minute off of my 5K time. So that's kind of exciting.
Wow,
yes,
that's a lot.
This is the first time in my whole entire life I've ever wanted to run a marathon. So yes, I am almost officially marathon training, but I am training for the training. So,
what's your routine?
Actually, you know what? Miss Janae Nicole, she's getting it in.
Because she's still running. She's running for NCAT, isn't she?
Yes, and she has her first collegiate meet on September 3rd. So nice. Excited about that. But she got me doing stuff every day, and this is my first time weight training too. So that's a huge difference this time around with my running. Is I'm weight training now, and I run with a lady who's really fast, so that helps a lot. And we just do stuff every day, and it's been freaking awesome. So yeah.
The way this came up, I was talking to Anika, and I said, "What have you done with your podcast time? Has your writing just blossomed and flourished?"
My legs have blossomed.
Yes. She said, "Well, the writing is still there, but I put my time into getting out and running more."
Yeah, I got to get this mind right for John Andrew when he's getting ready for these college applications, because it's about to pop up in a second. High school next
Awesome.
year.
So do you have a date on the calendar where you're going to run one?
No, I actually been looking at some at the end of the year, and me and my little self that doesn't know anything about marathons, I just knew I was about to get in the NYC marathon. They were like, yeah, no. It's like very competitive to get in that thing. But
is it like a certain time you have to have to qualify, or is it how far in advance you have to list and all that?
Fundraising. You have to fundraise for that thing and volunteer for so many things. And I'm sure it's changed dramatically even before. I think it was competitive before, but now it's like hyper competitive. But there are quite a few at the end of the year that I'm eyeballing, but yeah, I'm not going to put my finger on one until I feel like super, super, super comfy and saying, okay, this is my date. So we'll see.
All right. So you need to tell me about it, and I'll come on here and to give everybody an update.
I will do it.
Awesome.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
You know our article, and to celebrate you, you notice I picked an HBCU article to celebrate you.
Yeah, I did look at Mark trying to.
You know me. You know me. You know how I roll.
It was good, though. It was a good one, I will admit. So it
So why
is
don't you
called,
summarize it for us?
yeah, so it's called Driven Away by Hate. Actually, that's a question. She has a position as a question. Is Miss Greta Anderson again. This article, it was published in February 2021. So it's all about this study.
Inside higher ed.
Yeah, inside higher ed, yes. And so these two ladies, and I'll say their names in a second. So it's a study that has identified a link between an increase in hate crimes to the rise in students enrolling at HBCUs. And so Dominique Baker, she's a professor of education policy at Southern Methodist University. And you've got a Talani Britton, who's a professor of education policy at the University of California at Berkeley's Graduate School of Education. So together they co-authored the study, and they found the link again between, hate crimes being reported. And this is very specific. They said at a state level the state level of a 20% increase in Black students enrolling for the first time in HBCUs within those same states. And I feel like I didn't say that correctly. So basically there was the same rise that was in hate crimes in these very specific states. Those same states had Black students enrolling at higher rates at HBCUs. And so what they're demonstrating is that, if there's racial turmoil or, there's some racial stuff going on in a particular community, Black students are going to opt to go where they feel mentally and physically safe. And one thing, and just a couple of things I'll point out, and I'll let you, of course, dive in, Mark.
You're doing really well. I'm enjoying just listening.
So one thing they didn't draw a distinct, they didn't have any very clear results on was around the impact of campus hate crimes. So they're talking about community hate crimes, right? Like George Floyd and all these other things that, that have recently been, heightened the headlines. But the campus hate crimes aren't as much reported as the other hate crimes. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that goes underreported just, for a variety of reasons. And because of that, there's a lack of attention around it, and there's a lack of awareness around actual campus crimes. So there are hate crimes that are not on campus are the ones that they really focused on. So, there are other reasons, which I know, and I'm sure everyone else knows, that there are other reasons why Black students are enrolling at HBCUs at higher rates, but that is the central focus of this article. And they do speak on the other reasons, but let's first stop at these darn hate crimes. How about that?
Yeah, great summary. Awesome. Good stuff. And so, one of the things that the article points out is that they can't definitively say that there's a causal link. Mm-hmm. Right. And, there's no evidence has come forward, scientific evidence to prove that these increase in hate crimes is definitively necessarily the reason why there's such a surge in HBCU attendance. But it is, an incidental correlation that's sort of hard to ignore because it's so high. And I guess I should stop and I'd like to have a conversation with you. You know this because you're at an HBCU, and I know this because I'm in the business, but I don't think HBCUs have ever been this hot in my lifetime as far as the interest. And in fact, I just read an article yesterday, just numbers booming off the seams. It was primarily focused on Howard. And of course, you have this stuff there with, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Jones, the professor.
Sorry.
Kamala Harris, of course, the VP, but the professor that never got tenure at UNC, and then she went.
Hannah.
Yes, yeah, the author of the 1619 Project, who's a UNC alum and a superstar, and she was denied tenure at UNC, mostly because of the backlash from some of the white grievance movement. And they finally said, you know what, we're going to give you tenure, and she said, bump it. I don't, you didn't want me the first time. So she teamed up with Ta-Nehisi Coates and went to Howard. And then there's been a lot of other stuff. Alicia Rashad, you've got Kamala Harris, and Howard's numbers are through the roof. They've hit almost 25,000 applications last year. And I just read a brand new article that came on CNBC this week predicting another 15% increase next year. I will tell you
And
a
let me go
store.
ahead and say it. And Nicole Hannah Jones, you deserve to have your full name said. So
Yes, thank
put
you,
that
because
out
that was really bothering me.
there.
Nicole Hannah Jones. I just
Yes.
had the brain fart, and so thanks for bailing me out on that. But Anika and I have talked a lot of times. I mean, I know where she's at. I definitely see it's harder to get in. The kid that I would send there before does not get in
Oh yeah.
anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and their numbers are way up, all time smashing attendance records. You see that in the department you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, what does it feel like being at a school that's experiencing such a surge in enrollment? What's that like for you as somebody working on the inside? Let me just ask you that, because not every day we get an insider working at an HBCU in front of me.
Right. Well, but I will tell you though, we're kind of in like a superstar bubble over there because A&T has. I mean, they were getting a lot of attention even before all of this outbreak of madness, right?
Right.
Because A&T, their sports, like I feel like every athletic team at A&T is thriving at the top of their game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we were getting so much, we were growing so fast even before all of this. I'm honestly not privy to the other HBCUs and how there are really distinct differences in their enrollment numbers that are increasing, because we were hitting some pretty lofty targets, before a couple years, what is it, 3-4 years back now?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but A&T is the largest HBCU in the country. You've
Oh
gone
yeah,
over.
it was already the largest. Well, we were battling with Howard for a long time, but we've held it down for a few years now.
Yeah, you're over 13,000 now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Students.
Yep.
Do you know one thing I do want to talk to you about, and you alluded to it, and the article postulates this as kind of its main theme, but then it does go into other reasons. And that's what I'd like to have a conversation with you about. What are the reasons why you feel HBCUs are experiencing a surge beyond this article, which points to the correlation between what's going on in society and people, particularly Black students, clamoring for a safe space?
Well, I think it's quite a few things, but the one that I resonate with is that people are a little more sensitive to the fact the fact of the value of an HBCU.
Mhm.
The quality is now really able to shine through because of the A&Ts and the Howards, that were already shining, and then you really underscore and understand the importance of that mental safe space and the physical safe space. Like those are things, those are critical things. So I just think around, if you're dealing with racial and, if you're just dealing with this white hate coming at you every day on a PWI campus, why would I not want to attend a HBCU where I'm going to be, overvalued? Well, not overvalued, but you know what I mean? I'm gonna be cultivated and really respected. Let's just start with the respect. So I think there's just an increased awareness around the value of a Black community. I mean, that's just the way I call it. But
But do you attribute let me take a step back. What do you attribute the increased value being placed on that to? Because that just doesn't come out of blue, out of nowhere. Do you think it goes back to the incidents like this, like the article postulates, or do you think it's other things?
what do you mean? Like, are there other things outside of just being in a community that values who you are?
No, are there other things? Okay, because the person that's making a decision is making this decision like in 10th, 11th, 12th grade. They're not in college. It's
Right.
not like they're in college. They're experiencing a lot of racial animus, and they're saying, I'm going to transfer. Although I know that does happen as well. You do pick up transfer students that have had that experience, but majority of students are freshman enrollees, right, for a traditional school. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a person who's making this decision in 10th, 11th, and 12th, and I'm asking you, what do you think is contributing to their thinking that says, you know what, I was maybe going to go to PWI, but I'm going to go to HBCU now?
Well, the attention. Well, let's talk about the attention alone. Like you have all these headlines now about HBCUs. You have all these companies pouring billions of dollars, well, I wouldn't say billions, but millions of dollars into the schools. So
Hmm.
it goes back to what we've talked about before. Why kids choose schools anyway, because that's what they hear about. That's what my friends talk about, or that's what I hear about in the news, or that's what the ratings are talking about. So because of all of the attention that we're getting, alone is bring Black folks too, like, oh wow, I'd never really paid attention to a HBCU until now, because there is such an increased amount of awareness around them, or around us, I should say.
Here's a quote from the article that sort of supports some of what you're saying. It says, Britain believes there's several other factors that could contribute to increased Black enrollment at HBCUs, which are mostly unrelated to the prevalence of hate crimes or current racial tensions. She noted HBCUs have been promised increased federal funding, have lately experienced an influx of philanthropic support from wealthy donors like Mackenzie Scott, Reed Hastings. Those of you who don't know, Mackenzie Scott, ex-wife of Bezos, the biggest philanthropist this last year in anywhere in the world, $2.7 billion she gave away. And Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, he gave $120 million to 40 million to Spelman, 40 million to Morehouse, and 40 million to the United Negro College Fund. So those things got a lot of attention in the news. Kamala Harris got a lot of attention in the news.
Yeah,
definitely. Anytime you get a celebrity status like that, that's going to drive a lot of enrollment.
absolutely. Yep.
And the article does point to something else in here. And before I say what it is, I will share it through a story. So the last 2 years, I've done counselor programs at Morehouse, which is one of the more famous HBCUs in Atlanta, all male, home of Martin Luther King, Spike Lee, and so many, many other prominent dignitaries historically. And I was there and I was having lunch with the head of the business department, who had been there a really long time, was very knowledgeable. He had given a presentation that was very, very impressive about their business program. And so I had lunch with him. I got to pick his brain. And he shared with me that Morehouse applicants in 1 year went from 2,300 to almost 5,000. Now, this was 2 years ago. So this was pre-George Floyd. This was pre-Kamala Harris. And so I said to him, well, I can't remember if I said to him or he said to me, guess why you think we've exploded so much? So every guess that I made, Anika, it was like, no. I mean, you know me, I'm competitive. I'm like Dave trying to get admissions vernacular. I'm guessing, I'm trying to get it right. He finally wore me down. I ran out of guesses. And then take a guess what he said the answer was. Take one guess.
Athletes.
Nope. He said Trump.
Okay.
And I know that when I say that makes sense to you, because I know I've worked with families that have said they were choosing HBCUs because they don't like the political climate.
Right.
And they just don't want to deal with the incidents that they see happening in society. So the whole thing to flight to a safe space. And so it's kind of the reverse of what people would think when you say that, but it also makes sense.
Yeah.
So does that, when I say that, does that resonate with you? Yeah, I get that, or does that surprise you?
Both. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, he okayed all the hate. So yeah, he definitely made things worse than what they normally would have been, I guess, or I don't guess. I'm pretty sure. But yeah.
I mean, the reason why I think this is important, because I noticed this trend toward HBCUs started before all the publicity that's happened in the last year of the Reed Hastings gift and the Mackenzie Scott gift and these, like, no question, after the George Floyd incident, a lot of big donors in the country said, oh my goodness, we're so divided. What can we do about it? And it's reminiscent of the 60s. So if you go back and study the 60s, especially after all the uprisings that happened in the 60s with all cities burning down and everything, and then you had the Kerner Commission do a whole study of why are we having so many uprisings in all these cities, and then they produced a real detailed report. You can go back and read it. It's historical, about how we're completely divided, separate and unequal, and we're like in a real dangerous direction. And after that, there was this huge outpouring by a lot of people in society. That's what gave birth to a lot of affirmative action programs. Like, oh my goodness, we're like so separated. We've got to learn from each other. We've got to live together. What can we do? It almost reminds me of that. It's almost like 50 years later, there's another renaissance of that. So that's happened since the George Floyd incident. But what I'm saying is I started noticing this happening 3-4 years ago. I mean, wouldn't you say since you've been at A&T, there's been a steady surge? And I can't give you all the credit, Anika. I know you're superwoman over there. But I think this definitely predates the George Floyd, which was really recent.
Yep.
And, it's fascinating. I mean, the article goes on to say, we've got to get to the bottom of this because we got to understand what's going on. It's definitely a good thing for these schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have heard some complaints from some lesser known HBCUs that say the same ones get all the attention.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point earlier to say that, we are kind of in a bubble over there because, it's always about the Howards. It's always about Spelman, Morehouse. And, of course, A&T is rising on that rank too. And you get caught up in that mix. And and I was so happy that McKinsey gave so much money to all those others, so many other HBCUs outside of the top, 3 or 4, more name brand ones.
Yeah, and so I think this requires more scientific study. Like I know what I experience anecdotally from people who I work with.
Hmm.
At KIP, it's mostly black. Outside of KIP, it's maybe like 1 in 5 are black that I work with outside of KIP. But I still hear a lot of things from people along these lines. In fact, there's somebody at A&T right now that I worked with, and they came into the counseling process. He was determined to not look at an HBCU. He was very much kind of didn't want to do that. His dad had gone to a PWI, very, very successful, has his own financial firm and does very well. Mom actually was a Hampton alum, so an HBCU alum. So he had one HBCU, and they kind of like really weren't leaning in that direction. He wasn't leaning in that direction. And it was the stuff that was going on in society at the time that got them to look. That's just a sample size of one.
Right.
But I know there's other, I'm not going to mention his name, but there are other people out there like that. And then I think also, as HBCUs get more money, they're able to do more things too with that money, right? Which helps. Yep. It's kind of like people wonder, like, well, why I like the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Princetons. So, well, people keep giving them money, and then with that money, they do things that help to establish their stature.
Right. Yep.
So, is there anything you think we haven't covered that we should on this topic?
No, the only thing I was thinking about too when we talked about, why more enrollment, why the increased enrollment outside of the racial tensions. I did think about the athletics too, because Janaea just pointed out that I can't call, I don't know any of these athletes, but there's a guy, a big basketball player that wants to come to A&T and get on the golf team. And then there was this real young basketball player who was like, hey, I'm going to an HBCU. So I do know there's been a lot of spotlight around, the athletic heads and, people bringing more attention to choosing the HBCUs over where they may have traditionally gone, where I guess maybe trying to follow the money or something.
I've noticed little things in athletics. Like there's some people like on ESPN and this, that, the other, they make a habit of like always wearing a different HBCU shirt or HBCU hat, like when they're in front of the mic. Like there seems like there's almost this collective movement in the Black community that let's highlight and support our own institutions rather than run to all the other institutions. And it seems like there's a concerted effort there, which is all part of that publicity thing. I mean, I still would be the first to say it's a very much an individual decision. I mean, it's clearly something that was good for you. It was good for Giovanna. It was good for one of your kids did it. One didn't. Who knows what little John will do it? Neither one of my kids went to an HBCU. Joy came the closest to it. She considered A&T for her master's program. It was a runner-up, and Hampton was her third choice. And Howard's was my second choice. So I considered it. In the end, I chose not to. Joy considered it and chose not to. So it's a complex conversation that everybody individually has to have. And it's more common in the South, which is where most of the HBCUs are. Like I'm working with Black students in other parts of the country, a lot of times, unless they're sick and tired of being one of the only ones in their school, and they're just so looking forward to not being a minority for a while, which was kind of my experience.
Right.
It's not as prevalent in outside of the South as it is in the South. So what should our takeaways be?
HBCUs rock, number one.
You are the poster child. That's why I picked this article for you.
Well, they do.
I think Janaea may be replacing you. Janaea's a poster child. When I talked to Jalen, he had more of a mixed vibe because I know he spent one semester at A&T. He had more of a mixed review. So I think even within your own family, you have mixed response.
Yeah. Well, and not to say that, there aren't PWIs that don't rock. Jalen, he used to talk about, he's like, oh man, I don't know if I should have went to an HBCU or not. But the fact is that he didn't. And he optimized his experience, and it was pretty darn dynamic. And I do know, I have a one-off case where I know of a family recently that chose not to attend a HBCU, because that just wasn't their preference. So, I mean, like to your point, it's a very individualized decision. Not all Black people go to HBCUs. Not all white people go to PWI. So,
Yeah, and also not just because there's some turmoil that's happening more in society, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be your experience on a PWI campus either.
right.
It really doesn't,
Right. Mhm.
But perception's reality, and if that's your perception, then of course it makes sense that people would gravitate to a place that feels like it's a safe space where you won't have to deal with some of that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
So it's worth following, even for people that are like, look, I'm not Black. This doesn't relate to me. Like, if you're interested in trends in education, just like right now, community colleges are hurting, regional public colleges are hurting. Colleges in more remote areas are hurting. Colleges that are experiencing, a demographic cliff and the out-migration from their state, unless they have substantial stature, are hurting. That's a trend for anybody interested in following higher education that they should be aware of and should care about. And one of the trends is, no doubt that's real, is HBCUs are hot. Have you ever seen them this hot in your lifetime?
I have not. No.
Yeah.
I have not.
So between your 40 something and my 50 something, we got 100 years together.
Good Lord.
When you put it that way.
Woo!
I was thinking this week, this is off topic, Anika, but you don't know this yet because the episode hasn't even gone live yet.
Mhm.
But last week I recorded, I recorded under a blanket because I didn't like my sound. Yeah, I did. I was sweating under there. Naman, our sound engineer, he said, you do not need to do that anymore. I can work on getting rid of that hollow sound on the back end.
Oh my God.
But remember how you used to call yourself a sound snob?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a sound snob now, and I've been going back, and I've not, ever since I moved to the basement. I'm really kicking myself because I did all this research on mics,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't realize how important the room is. The room is just as important as your mic.
Mm-hmm.
And so ever since I moved to the basement, it's a big open space, and it's like Travertine stone floor. So it's all the reverb, the sound's bouncing all off the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched all these videos, and I saw one on NPR. They get under a blanket, it'll block everything. And I literally was under there. Not kidding. But now I've created a pillow fort. So now you're watching me in my pillow fort.
You and your pillows. Good gracious.
I'm in a pillow fort. I'm surrounded. And guess what? I decided to make my own audio studio. So I researched all of that.
MG, Mark.
Well, I wanted to have it professionally done, but it was literally going to be thousands. And it was not in the budget.
Oh my God.
To take a whole room and have them come out and create sound panels, just like a studio.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't have that in the budget. It wasn't planned. But then I said, you can create your own for like $500 to $600. I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I've got all materials. Everything's coming. But until it comes, I'm in a pillow fort. And I hope to have the portable sound booth set up in the next 2 weeks.
Oh.
But all this is because you rubbed off on me. You made me a sound snob.
Good for you. And the YCBK audience. Well, make that listen. If you build that room, go ahead and make some money off of it and rent it out or something. You make some money back.
Look at you thinking the entrepreneurial way. Awesome.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
How are you, Lisa?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You're about to go on the hot seat.
Oh, boy. My favorite place.
Well, when I recorded the section with Anika, I said, we're going to pass on admissions tip, admissions vernacular, and the big number, because I can just chit-chat with Anika. But then these questionnaires are coming in from our listeners, and I found out they love that section. So I felt guilty. So I said, I'll just resurrect it with you. So for the admissions tip, actually, I'm going to do a two-parter related to the why us, why this school, why essay the next 2 weeks. So the two most common mistakes I see people make, and I might even do a third. But the first is just this week's tip, which is people are too general.
Mm-hmm.
They're too general. They say things like, I really like your academics, as opposed to saying, I love that your criminology courses are taught by case studies, like, getting down to that granular specific level, and that kind of thing. I really like that you're in the city as opposed to, I really like that, you have volunteer opportunities at the local children's hospital, in the pulmonary unit. And, then that's always interested me. And so that's the kind of level of specificity and granularity that really separates, better ones from mediocre ones. And so that's one of the most common mistakes I see. And I'll be back with next week with another. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do a third. So that's our tip for the week. And I know you see that too, because you work. Yeah. I know we're working together on writing on quite a few students. So
yeah, well, there's a certain relative of mine who shall remain nameless, but in this person's Why Northwestern essay, they wrote that they liked that it was convenient to many lovely fast food restaurants, and I was just like, no, you cannot send that in. So yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, you know what I tell students? I say, when you're talking about the school, I want your answer to be something that can only apply to that school.
Right.
That's the level of specificity. So ask yourself, could this only apply to this unique school? And that will help a lot right there if you put yourself in that mindset. So good advice. All right. Here we go. So I have to give you a hard one because you're like pretty knowledgeable. So our admissions vernacular is going to be differential tuition.
Oh, geez. Differential tuition. Is that like tuition that's different between different majors? So at the University of Illinois, they have like a different price for the communications majors versus the biology majors.
I need to get harder with you. You got it. Yes, that's it. And the reason I picked that today is because our spotlight's on Temple, and Temple uses differential tuition. Penn State uses differential tuition. Now, differential tuition is actually the norm at Canadian universities. You may pay one price for a business major versus another major, and that's differential tuition. So you use those Dave deduction powers there.
I was channeling my inner Dave there.
You were. And I need to channel my go to PhD level and get out of like undergrad level for you. Awesome. All right. So the big number this week is 500,000. And what that refers to is, I heard recently a credible report. There are currently 500,000 openings in cybersecurity jobs.
Oh, my goodness.
500,000. So if anybody wants to know what's a college major that you will not be without a job, of course, you need to have a skill set and you need to like it. But there's a good one for you, cybersecurity, because think about it. I mean, these companies cannot afford to get hacked and, and cost multi-millions. And so if you've got the skill set to help them with that, then they're shelling out the bucks. So that's our big number.
Well, for all you smart, computer-minded people out there, you have a future in preventing other people from doing bad things with computers.
Yeah, and I just heard this week, and I can't remember if it was Google or Microsoft, but it's one of them, where they said they're going to be training 100,000 people, in this field, data analytics as well. And so that's where it's not the only place where the JOBs are, but there certainly are JOBs there. There we are. All right. I'm excited to do our question, Lisa, because we actually did this question as a trial run for those who are donors. We send a monthly audio blog out with bonus content for all of our financial supporters of our podcast to enable us to be commercial free and to pay our staff. Because it was really time sensitive, and we did a abridged version. And so I felt like we got a trial run, which we never got to do before, and we got a really good response to it. And so I'm hoping that our broader audience will like it as well. So take it away.
Sure. Well, this question is from a mom in Wisconsin. And she says, "Hi, Mark. Not sure if this is a topic for you or not, but I have heard every episode, and I do not believe that you've talked about the emotional side of kids leaving for college or leaving the parents. And since moms are a big part of your audience and you have Lisa now, maybe she could say a few words about it. I am just really struggling with having my daughter go so far away. I know she's ready to spread her wings, but I'm going to miss being so connected to her. Around my area, it is so not the norm to go far away where we live, so I don't have a lot of mom friends who can relate. Most kids go close to home, and the higher achievers just go to UW Madison, which is very close. If it's not admissions related enough, no problem, I understand. I was just thinking of it since it could be a new topic that I don't believe you've addressed.
I'm trying to think, how many times have we had a question that's targeted to the parents like this? You know, I mean, this is very targeted to the parents, and I was very excited when this question came across because I knew it was one a lot of people could relate to. And like the mom from Wisconsin said, we've got Lisa here. So let's take advantage of the fact that we have someone that's both the clinical psychologist as well as a college counselor. And give us your thoughts. Lisa, take the lead on this, and I'll chime in with some of my thoughts.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start with a quote that I read around the time that we adopted our daughter, and I thought it was so powerful. And I think of this quote all the time, and it's by Elizabeth Stone. She's an educator, and she says, "Making the decision to have a child, it is momentous. It is to decide forever to have your heart go walking around outside your body." And for me, that's really captured a lot of what parenting is like. You know, you love your child so much, but you're kind of scared and anxious that something might go wrong for them and something might happen. And I think that's really relevant when we think about how we feel when our kids go off to college. You know, I kind of have to remind myself sometimes that, you know, the goal of childhood and parenthood is to get your kids to reach adulthood and have them become independent adults. And it's not to keep us company. It's not to, you know, be connected with us. It's not to serve our ego needs for success. Our job is to get them out, get them launched, and have them be able to, you know, succeed on their own. And that's a really difficult transition for both kids and parents. So, you know, there's kind of this period when the kid, you know, they make their commitment to college, and then, you know, a few months later, they're packing up and leaving. And that period's a very tricky transitional situation. And I think it's really important in order to cope with that period is to recognize that everybody in this situation, including your child, is scared because it's change, and change is hard, even if it's a positive change. And it's sort of where separation, individuation, that process that goes on, it starts in infancy and it goes on through adulthood, where kids are getting progressively more and more separate from their parents and independent. This is where the rubber really hits the road with separation and individuation. And it's not a pretty process a lot of the time. It's messy, it's ugly, it's fraught with conflict and tears usually on both sides. And I think both parties generally tend to feel misunderstood. There are lots of anecdotal stories that I've heard about teens the summer before they leave for college, and some express their fear by being so obnoxious that their parents are almost relieved that they're gone. It's like that unpleasant, you know? And so it's kind of, I think, like nature's way of easing the transition for everyone. And I made this analogy in the bonus material that's sort of like if you're pregnant and, you know, those last few days when you're pregnant, you're so uncomfortable. And that's, I think, nature's way of getting you ready for delivery. Because you're like, I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. I don't care how it happens. I'm so uncomfortable. This needs to end. You've got to go. And that's how women get kind of psyched for delivery, is just to end their discomfort. And the same thing is kind of true, I think, with, you know, sending your kid off to college. And so if your kid is pushing you away right now, or, you know, was pushing you away in the summer, it's not personal. It's kind of what they need to do to feel separate from you. They sort of have to make you the bad guy. You kind of have to be the dumb one. They have to feel like they don't need you. And to do that, they kind of distort who you are, but it's not personal and it's not permanent. The other thing I would just say is that I think, you know, it's important to be authentic and express your emotions, but if you're absolutely hysterical a lot when you're dropping your kid off, when you're driving your kid to the college, when you're in the dorm room and you're crying and you're inconsolable, that's hard for your child. And so as much as you can, you know, I'm not saying to be like stiff upper lip and don't have any feelings and don't express any feelings, but try to just keep it manageable for everyone. Know that when they're gone, you can have your good old cry and express it however you want. So that's some thoughts I have just about the pre-stage and sort of that transition. I'm just going to stop here, Mark, and see if you have anything you want to add or any questions.
Yeah, it's first of all, thank you for that. You know, I have this question that I have on my questionnaire which keeps growing longer, by the way, as I discover new questions. It's up to like 110 questions for students and 48 for parents. But one of the questions for parents is, how important is safety to you on a scale of 1 to 10? And I almost removed that question because everybody is putting 10.
Mm-hmm. And
I think one of the reasons why this is so difficult is because it gets at that fear of safety.
Yes.
And that safety could be a physical safety, like what's going to happen to them. It could also be an emotional safety.
Absolutely.
They're going to, encounter and walk into an abusive situation. And, I hesitated about sharing something I'm going to say because I don't want to add to people's angst, but I'm going to do it, and hopefully it's worth sharing. But I've had a couple horror stories that I've had with students that I've worked with, and I'm only sharing this to say, like, people aren't crazy about having some angst, because some bad things can happen. Like, one of the students I worked with got involved with like the big man on campus, big football star, and he was like going to the NFL and all this stuff, but he was physically beating her. And like one of the parents literally had to cut off paying for school because she was in one of those codependent relationships where she didn't want to leave and this, that, the other. And the only way to get out of it was, I'm not paying your tuition. And then another situation where someone got involved with someone. This is a highly selective school. Both of these schools were highly selective schools. This kind of thing that you think, well, you put your kid in this environment, you like to think people are pre-screened. And it turned out that another boyfriend situation, you got to watch out for those boys. The guy was dealing drugs, and it ended up being really bad. I don't want to get into all the details, but it was kind of a similar situation. And that one of the parents had to basically go rescue their child from this. So I say all this to say, like, not trying to increase angst and trepidation over here, but I'm trying to say, like, you're not crazy if you have fears, because it is a big, bad world out there. Yeah. And things can happen. And so I think this is, my view on this. A lot of the anxiety comes from the fear of safety. And I think it can be particularly strong with women because, you're even wondering about things like, you hear about things like date rape and all these different things. And there's that kind of thing. And there's always that feeling when somebody's right under your thumb that you're in control, even that a lot of bad stuff can happen, like in the home in high school that you may not know about. I use the example of like the difference between like driving a car and taking a plane. Like, the plane is actually safer, but it feels like you're totally out of control. It feels like you're in control when you're driving. And that's how it feels like when they're kind of in your home right around you. You sort of feel like you've got things under control, and that lack of control and all of the things that can happen, or all the way where your mind can go with that, I think that's one of the things that causes some of the anxiety. I know for myself, we were raised in a home where our kids went away a lot, like from a very young age. Their grandparents are in Canada, so they went there for 3 weeks every summer. And then my oldest daughter, Karis, she went to Honduras 5 straight years in a row, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and in college. And I remember I was talking to my Aunt Betty, my dad's sister, when she found out Karis was going to Honduras. What are you doing letting her go to Honduras? And then she sent me like the crime stats. And then all of a sudden, like, my heart was palpitating. It was like a different level of that trepidation. Another thing that I'll say is there's a difference. Like in this mom from Wisconsin indicated her daughter's going a long ways away. There's a difference between if your child's going 90 minutes away versus 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles. You can feel that distance. I remember I spent a summer in Daly City, California in 1989 when I was in grad school. And for those of you who don't know, that's just like 20 minutes south of San Francisco, the Bay Area. And this is how long ago this was. This was pre-cell phone. They had cell phones, but those big clunker blocks, cell phones, yeah. The big clunker ones.
The shoebox cell phone.
Yeah. And also they were expensive too. I didn't have any money back then. And so, the people that had them were paying like $500-600 a month, if I remember correctly. And so I felt that distance. Like, I'm like thousands of miles away. I can't talk on the phone, and you feel that distance. And so I think some of that is feeling that disconnect. And we're all creatures of habit. Like, think about it as a parent, like you said, starting from the time in the womb, you've just been intricately connected to your child. You've gone to band practice. You've gone to debate competitions, to AAU games, to help them with their homework, to watching the plays. Like, you've been at everything. And then to all of a sudden just sort of have the rug pulled under you like that, that's a pretty drastic change. And a lot of times the kids are the center of the home. It's not necessarily like the mom and the dad, but the kid is the center of everything. And so all of those, it's perfectly understandable to have those kinds of emotions. But transitioning to some positive advice, Lisa had a fantastic suggestion when we talked about this before, and I'd like you to share one of the suggestions now, and then pay attention to our recommended resource, everyone, because Lisa will take a lead on that as well, and she's got another excellent resource that'll be helpful for parents. But why don't you talk about the Facebook support group?
Sure. Well, I think the one thing that we all have in common, we parents, is that we all experience this. It's a near universal parenting experience of being anxious and upset when your child leaves for college or goes off and does their adult things. And you're not alone. And if you join the Facebook group Grown and Flown, especially this time of year, you're going to see lots of posts and lots of support around people who are going through this, people who have been through this with their older children. And I think it's really comforting to know that, everyone's going through this, and most of the time it turns out okay. I think you made such a good point, Mark, about the whole idea of being fearful for your child's safety, whether it's emotional, academic, physical, financial, whatever it might be. And, that's one of the really hard things in life in general, is how do you tolerate the idea that bad things can happen to you or the people you love and you can't control them, right? That's a universal thing that we all struggle with. And we're all trying to balance sort of not paying attention to that, but being aware of it when it's important. Because if we thought about it all the time, then you'd just be in the corner crying all day and you wouldn't get anything done. So, I always, in this case, I would say, try to just think about for yourself, try to articulate really how you feel. So I'd say ask yourself, you can write it down, you can put it in your phone, you can just think it, but what am I going to miss about my child being gone? And how will my life be different? And then write down, what am I afraid is going to happen? And just put everything down, no matter how crazy or sane that fear might be, just put it all down. And then write, what do I hope is going to happen? What's the best case scenario? And think about how you envision that. And then when you're looking at all these things, I want you to ask yourself, what can I personally do to influence the outcome of any of these events? And I'm going to tell you what, the answer to that question is going to be nothing. You can't do anything. That's up to your child. And so, at that point, when I'm in my practice and people have anxiety, I always tell them, look at the situation, see if there's anything you can do to fix that situation. Most of the time, there isn't anything they can do to fix that situation. They would have already done it and not been talking to me. And then if you can't fix it, you have to learn to live with it. And there are ways to learn to live with anxiety, and we all have our different coping mechanisms. Some people do relaxation exercises or yoga or meditation or distraction. They read a book, or they watch their favorite show, or they exercise, or, they work harder, or they paint, but it's really important to just start to work on developing those coping skills when your child goes away to college. And it's also true, you alluded to this, the kids are the center of our lives, at the center of our family lives and our homes. And we are in a very big era of intensive parenting. And so when that focus leaves and you don't have that much influence on it, it is really hard. You have to think, well, what am I going to do with all that time and energy? And I hope that you'll turn it into positive things for yourself, and kind of put that energy back in your own self-development. That can be very comforting.
Yeah. And another thing, I feel like we've almost been talking about it like it's a negative that you need to learn to cope with, almost like you've got lupus or something. So learning how to cope with it. But I want to focus on the positive side. I want to start with a story. So a friend of mine, and he would not mind me sharing his name because he shares this story publicly himself. His name's Yuri. And, he grew up in New York City. He went off to St. Paul's, which is a, highly selective boarding school. John Kerry went there. It's in New Hampshire. And then after 4 years at St. Paul's. He went to Williams College. So the point is he stayed in the Northeast. And then after Williams College, he took admissions jobs. All the admissions jobs he took were either in New Jersey or New York or in either Massachusetts or New England. And I was talking to him, a little while ago, and he said, you know what? I wish that I would have gone to the West Coast or the Midwest because I have a very limited view of this country. Because every move I've made, I've stayed in the same region. And I feel like my horizons could have been broadened. And I want to say that, like, your child is going to benefit by living in a whole different environment with different exposure to people from different places, and they're going to grow. And so it's helpful to know that while you might be experiencing some loss and some angst, they're getting a great thing. And that, I think that helps a lot. Like, I've sent over 100 kids to boarding school, and that's really hard because, it's like a 14-year-old going off. But one of the things that really helps get parents over that hump is when they see the opportunities that their child is getting that they would not get at their local school in the area. And I really think it's important. And you will see this. You will see that growth when you see them at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. And while I shared a couple horror stories, which maybe I shouldn't have shared, I don't know, but those are so rare, right? Like, right. Those are extremely rare. Like, that happens less than 1% of the time. And most of the time, everything's going to work out. It's really going to be fine. Let me share this. I fully expected Karis to go to Scripps College in the Claremont colleges. I just always felt that she would love the racial diversity of California with its large Asian, Latino, biracial, black-white population and the more laid-back vibe. I just feel like it fits her. So we took a trip at the end of her 10th grade to visit Pomona, Scripps, Pitzer, Occidental, Pepperdine, Claremont McKenna, and some other schools. And Scripps was the one she liked the most. In fact, they flew her back out again, which is very unusual after somebody's already visited, and she absolutely loved it. So we were a little surprised when she liked Davidson even more. But even though we would have missed her dearly, we looked at it as a gift we were giving Karis to let her go to California, to have her horizons expanded by living in a different part of the country and having new experiences. And would we have felt the distance? Absolutely. I mean, Joy just went from being less than 100 miles away in Athens to 400 miles away in Raleigh, and we feel that. So throw in a couple thousand more miles, and yes, it would have hurt. But here's how I look at it. It hurts me when I pay the bills that I've paid for my kids, private school tuition for every year for Joy and all but 1 year for Karis, AAU sports, international travel, college tuition. But every penny of that investment was worth it because of the investment in their future. So that's kind of how I see letting them go away from home. The other thing that I want to share, and this is advice that I've given to parents that's been helpful. One of the things that sometimes is hard for students and parents in this situation is that we want to talk to our kids a lot. And you alluded to this, Lisa, but they don't necessarily want to talk to us. And it makes it really, really hard when you're longing for their companionship. You're concerned about their welfare. And maybe it's not physical safety. Maybe it's like academically. How are they going to function? I'm used to checking up with them on their homework. And now I don't know if they're going to be able to do well without my support. It could be a lot of things. But one of the things that I have found is really helpful is if parents and students can come up with an agreed upon time that they will like do a FaceTime or do a chat. And it has to be something that works for the student and the parent. But like, it's really hard for a parent if they just have no idea like when they're going to hear from their kid. But if the student says, you know what, from 7 to 7:30 every Sunday, we'll do a FaceTime, and I'll text you through the week. And if you can have a little bit of regularity or at least come up with some agreed upon communication plan, I've found that that's been really helpful for parents. Because in generally what happens is that the kid gets busy with their friends. They're not necessarily missing us the way we're missing them. And the lack of communication can really make it hard because you don't know what's going on. And you're like, why don't they want to talk to me? And how do I even know they're safe? And so that's just another tip. But anything else you want to share, Lisa?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that, some of the best advice that I got was that to think of your role as a parent changing. So you're not just parenting now, you're the coach. So a coach advises the team, but they don't get out and start playing with the players on the field. And so, you give advice if you're asked, you maybe try to point your kids in the right direction, but you shouldn't intervene in a situation unless it's completely necessary. And so there are going to be minor disasters that come up, right? But your child needs to have those experiences in order to learn how to be a grown-up, how to be resilient, how to solve problems. And if we don't let them mess up, they're never going to figure that out. So, you just have to have confidence, like you've done a good job. You're passing the baton to your kid, and they're going to start running, and they're probably going to stumble, and they're going to fall more than you want them to. But if you think back to your own adolescence, I bet you did too. I know, whenever I think about myself as a college student or early 20s, I'm just like, oh, that was so stupid. I continually remember more dumb things that I did. And, I'm still around. I, survived that all. And your kids are going to too. And, anything that your kid does now, it's not really a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. It's their accomplishments, their failures, and we have to let them have that. And I just want to say, and I know I've said this before, but I really think that parenting is a very long game, and that really, some kids don't figure out who they are till they're 30, and that's okay. You can't compare your kid to anybody else's kid. Everyone develops in their own way, at their own pace, based on their individual circumstances. And, just have faith that you gave them the right values, that you tried to show them how to cope, and that they're going to pull that out when it's necessary.
Yeah, and I want my last comment. I wanted to build off something that you said earlier, Lisa. I loved your point when you talked about all the things that somebody can do, whether it's painting or, exercising or watching their favorite show and all of that. And I know you were talking about that somewhat in the context of coping and having a diversion, but this is an opportunity for you as a parent to explore maybe a whole other area.
Absolutely.
Because you now have a lot of time. And so there's a good chance there's something you've always wanted to do. Maybe you wanted to go back to school. Maybe you want to take a course, on an online course, and maybe you want to do, like you heard Anika talk about earlier, run a marathon. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Join a book club, travel. I mean, and so this can be a really great opportunity, to focus on some aspect of self-development that maybe you've always wanted to do, but your life's been so centered around giving to your kid that you haven't had the time to do it.
Absolutely. There are real advantages to not having an adolescent live in your house full time. Number one, I'm sure it's going to be a lot cleaner. It's probably going to be quieter. And you do have this energy to put into yourself. And especially, I think, for women, we are so conditioned to just give everything to our children, to not think of ourselves. And it's kind of jarring when you're like, wait, I have this time now. What do I do with it? But it is a wonderful opportunity to really figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. And so many great things can happen in those moments.
Great. Well, thanks for that. Lisa. Hopefully this was helpful, listeners. Send us your emails and give us your honest feedback. I'm going to get roasted. I can take it. Comes with the turf.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Eric, thanks for coming back again. And this week I want to dive right in with something you said last week. You talked about the transition from admissions to college counseling. One of my favorite questions to ask anyone is, what have you learned? What have you learned about the college admissions process now that you're seeing it from a different lens? What have you learned about high school students? Anything you want to share?
Well, it's been a great transition, and the reason I'm framing it that way, and then I'll get into more detail, is that I was fortunate enough at Penn Charter to be on campus for a good part of this last half year. I started in January of 2021, and for the most part, I was in the office, and the upper school students were on campus every other week. And so that was really refreshing after running an office, a large office virtually, when I was in the admissions office at the University of Pennsylvania. Steep learning curve always comes to mind when this question is asked of me. And I feel that as I represented myself for the role that I had in the college counseling office at Penn Charter, that I wanted to make sure that people weren't too enamored with the dean of admissions and all the bells and whistles they feel come with that. I was really purposeful about saying, hey, I know enough about what I don't know, and then there's the whole area of knowledge that I'm not even aware of yet that I'm going to need to learn.
And you also want to make sure they don't think their kid is automatically getting into Penn also.
Yeah, the pixie dust is gone, right? There's no more of that. That sprinkle that and everything's okay. Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. And so, really fortunate with great colleagues who, are open enough that I just ask a lot of questions. And again, I think this may be career advice as well. It's asking a lot of questions, a lot of DIY. It's do it yourself. I used to have a very large office and, really operating off of a laptop and creating your own files and surveys and building off of the work that other people, put in prior to you. So, the pieces of advice are, just absorb and learn as much as you can because you need to do that. Be as self-sufficient as possible. And towards the end of the year, Mark, I was seeing this a little bit more, and I'm hoping for it at the beginning of this academic year, is understand where the students are in their schedule. And I saw as they were getting past their finals and we had still a few more days on campus, on Penn Charter's campus, that's when they could come in and just chat with me and be open. And because they didn't have the finals or papers or other things hanging over their head. So recognizing the rhythm of where the student is, it's not around your schedule. It's really around what their needs are and how much you can meet them where they are at a given time of day, as well as through the academic semester.
Yeah, some of the answers I've heard from admission offers over the year asking them that is, I can't believe we sent out denials when people were in school. Like, if you're like, what were we thinking? Or another one said, I cannot believe all of the materials that I would leave with people. Now that I'm on this end, now in COVID, you might not be getting it as much, but then another one said, before a denial was just a denial, like it was somewhat detached. Now I'm living with that person and feeling all their emotions. And so it's just a fascinating question. I always like to, because with anything, share their two sides of the coin, right? Receiving and sending, but they're the same, but they're different. So it's fascinating.
It really is. And, you do see the communications that come out of admission offices to college counseling offices at certain times of year, particularly on the heels of decisions. And then also over the summer where there's more counselor facing programming. And, the reality is we are in this together while needing to recognize that everyone does have their vantage point and the responsibilities that they have, to their institution. While I think as broadly as any family and student and college counselor can think of this, as well as the admission officers, maybe you could see how kind of the different pieces of higher education and secondary education are together. Now, maybe I'm going a little too far afield, and we talk about the transition process in the college conversation, as we've mentioned, is, what about that synapse between secondary school and higher education, right? I think that's where we could spend even more time and attention to make sure that students are being prepared for that next step, while also experiencing what they need to experience in secondary school, which is not college.
One thing I can tell is it just kind of radiates out. I can tell you're sort of enjoying the relationship piece, that you can actually have a student that you can have some sustained and prolonged interaction with at a level that goes beyond what you had to do when you're processing so many applications and decisions and then go on and get next year's class.
Well, that's exactly it. And those are the best moments. And seeing the students come in, again, where they are, because they're not always going to come in like an applicant is coming in, right? They're not always being their shiniest self. And I really appreciate when students are able to, again, even through COVID, come into the office, just sit down and let out some air and say, this is what they're going through and this is what their experience is.
Good stuff. Well, I want to ask you a general question and then get into kind of our topic of the day. So, so Eric, you hear a lot about the demographic cliff and birth dearth and how so many less kids are being born coming up in, 2026 and 7. And then, the something you addressed in your book, you're very sensitive in your book. You talk about the cost of college being over $80,000 at some schools and the average household making between 63 and 64. Is higher ed on a path that's not sustainable, in your opinion, without some significant changes?
Well, I think that any changes that were already present in any workspace, business, industry, you saw what became under extreme circumstances, but basically what their stress levels were and how resilient the institutions or the business or educational setting, how resilient they were or were not, how prepared they were. This, Mark, always comes down to, for me, I use 2 words, maybe 3. Learning. There's the admission officer. Can't be 16.
See if we get to 4.
I know it'll be 20 by the time I'm done here. It's learning and credentialing. So it's knowledge, it's learning, and it's credentialing. And what does that look like in? This doesn't operate in a vacuum. What does it look like under certain economic conditions? What does it look like under certain global conditions? What does it look like with where the job market is at any given time? And then the choices that families will make based on the information that they have, and also the what their upbringing is like, it's what's expected of them next. And I do think with the experiences over the last couple of years, especially, is that, how open are the doors of higher education? How closed are the doors to higher education? What is the benefit? We talk about, that's conclusions of the 4+1, the 5 C's, right? It's kind of cost and conclusions. What am I investing in? What am I looking for? And what are the potential outcomes? And absolutely, higher education is under huge strain right now. And some of it, as with any organizations, brought on itself, while also, again, how adaptable is this kind of knowledge, learning, and credentialing? And what does that then look like for, yes, lifelong learning, because that's what we value as well, while also the practical pieces of, well, where's the economy and what do I need to learn? And what are some of the opportunities for me to be able to provide for myself, provide for my family, and, thinking about that next generation.
And I'm sure schools will, make adaptations and reinvent themselves, and the ones that won't will suffer for it.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
All right, friends, our recommended resource for this week is a book that Lisa has read that I have not, and I can't wait to read it. And it relates to our previous conversation of advice for parents. So, Lisa, take it away.
Yes. In preparation for answering this question, I read The Naked Roommate for Parents Only, A Parent's Guide to the New College Experience, and it's by Harlan Cohen. And he also wrote The Naked Roommate, which is for students. And both books are hilarious. But he really gives such wonderful advice for parents in a very relatable and humorous way. He tells lots of funny stories of his own experiences as a college student and as a parent. And I think it was very helpful for me, even though like my daughter's going into her sophomore year. I wish I had this book last year, but it's still good for me now. And I think it'll be good for you too. I just definitely recommend you check it out.
I want to read it. And I've had Harlan Cohen's The Naked Roommate as a recommended resource for students. Like, it's one of the first ones we did. And, I get invited to a lot of graduation events. And guess what? People get a copy of The Naked Roommate. That's my gift. That's my $12 gift to everybody.
So now you have to give this to their parents.
Yeah, now I need to just spend $25 and just get
That's
both.
Right.
No, I'm serious. That would be great. The parents are the ones who invite me a lot of times. So, yeah, so check it out. We'll have it up there on our website. By the way, we have over 50 books now that are recommended if you just go to your collegeboundkid.com resource section. Over 50 books and over 50 websites. So check that out as well. Thanks, Lisa.
But let's transition to talk about our topic of the day. All of our listeners know that I brainstorm with all interviewees, and Eric could talk literally about almost anything, but I loved when he made this suggestion. Why don't we talk about, in general, questions about selective admissions? Not necessarily focus on Columbia or Penn, but in general. And you may draw off examples from your experiences there. I mean, you've got a decade plus at each institution, and then your Common App experience as well. So I want to start out by talking about yield. And our listeners know we say this all the time. Yield is the percentage of admits that accept your offer. So a school accepts 100 kids, do 20 come, do 80 come. And as Eric knows, yield is like critical when you're in admissions, right? Because you have targeted goals you have to hit. And so you have to be able to have some way of trying to figure out in enrollment management, how you're going to hit those goals, how many kids you have to admit versus wait list versus not accepting, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of my questions is, what are some ways beyond early decision, which is obviously a binding program and not all schools offer it, that colleges use to project yield?
Well, you could really slice and dice the outcomes that you expect, while also it was always interesting whenever we kind of like hit the yield number that we wanted, or the class enrollment number that we wanted, and understanding that there's years that you can really adjust with the wait list, and that's really an important topic for us to cover. While what was quite interesting to me was, wow, we hit that class. But then you really dig into it, and you may not have hit the class for the reasons you thought you would. So, were there gender differences in terms of, that swung? I mean, that there are differences, geographic, further away from your campus. I never worked at institutions that had merit-based money. It was always need-based financial aid, and fortunate enough to meet 100% of that need as defined by the colleges, maybe not always as defined by the families.
Not defined by the family.
Yeah, that could be another conversation. While, for those schools that do have merit money, it's, what is that price sensitivity in a competitive market, and will an additional $5,000 a year change the outcome? What amount will actually change the outcome or influence the outcome? And so the biggest surprise in all the years that I worked in college admissions, and you brought up early decision, was 20 years ago. Actually, it was the 9/11 year, and I was the executive director at Columbia. And when we went out with our offers of admission in December, we leaned on early decision a little bit more than we had in previous years, just not knowing what would take place. And then also we were surprised by both the college, Columbia College, and the engineering school, which usually don't move in the same direction with yield, that we actually had a pretty sizable increase in yield. And that was largely because of families who wanted to stay closer to home. So it was less about, will I go to New York, versus families who are in this dense population area, the greater New York area, including the outlying suburbs and New Jersey and Connecticut, is those families seem to make the decisions that they wanted to be closer, whether they could drive there or not to get their child. So the yield actually went up. So here's not a question, but another perspective on this question, and that is, I think sometimes in admissions, as with so many decision makers, we're good about adjusting for what just happened, and then the counterintuitive may happen. So the year that last year, but the second to last year, when I was in the admission seat at Penn, and it was really the beginning of COVID, we went to the wait list fairly heavily compared to history, like 400 students, close to 400 students off the wait list. I think then going into this year, I think many individuals, including myself in some ways, although I was out of the seat starting in January, would have felt that, okay, we're going to have another wait list year because families are going to make decisions like they made last year. And there was little waitlist activity, at least from what I could see across the board. And so again, you're really good about making adjustments to what happened last year. And you really do have to look over this over a longer period of time. And then maybe this is the final piece, is you have to really calculate, what's the upside and what's the downside. Where are you most vulnerable and what do you need to guard against? And if you guard against it too much, what are the other implications that are going to come through either on the financial aid side or the housing side, on the instructional side? And so that's really what you need to calibrate.
How sophisticated do you feel that your yield models were that you built? Like, are you looking at things like, well, on a school basis, here's how many kids we've admitted from this school, here's how many have come. Do you look at geography as in, we know when kids are within our, let's just say our backyard versus, let's say Colorado, California, or some other location, yield is going to be significantly different. International students, alumni, maybe a kid with a lower profile, but you see something exciting in them and you admit them, versus the kid that, this kid's getting in everywhere. I've done this long enough to know. Like, how much are you looking at multiple variables when you're sort of building out a yield model?
Well, my first answer to that is hire really smart people, and I've always been pretty good at that.
That's good.
It's not hard for me to surround myself with people smarter than me. I'm just like, it's like, get those minds, and that's really where kind of this enrollment piece has come. And so, really fortunate, working back from always having a strong operational team. And also in the director's seat at Penn, John McLaughlin, he has a highly analytical mind, doctoral degree. He really gets it. Yvonne Romero da Silva, who we know, who's at Rice University.
She's fantastic. That was when she was at Penn, and still fantastic.
David Phillips, who's the head of it, is the head of admissions and financial aid. He has a broader portfolio at Hopkins, and so hired individuals who had that type of mindset. And then really, ask them the probing questions. So here's a piece of advice. And I certainly think John would reflect this as well. John McLaughlin will reflect this as well. Don't overcomplicate it. Okay. Yes, there are variables. There are multiple variables, while also you could start out thinking yourself. And so, maybe you're not keeping it up to this level, but you may not have to get down to that granular level, somewhere in between where you're going to get pretty close. And then again, really guard against whatever your biggest upside or downside is. And that could be financial or having too many students, and just trying to calibrate. And also, working with your provost, president, the VP, whoever you're reporting into. Institutional researchers always really important on a college campus, particularly in these conversations. You're surrounded by a lot of smart people, bounce the ideas around and put out some what if scenarios. And then at the end of the day, you need to make the decision as the chief enrollment officer.
Follow-up question on that. From your experience, what percentage of colleges have somebody in-house that's their quant and, crunching all the numbers, doing the data analysis, versus outsourcing that to, we know there's firms that specialize in running these elaborate models. And so what's your sense on if this is mostly done in-house or outsource and find somebody outside that does that kind of thing for you?
It's a good question, and I'm really not sure how to answer it. I would say that at least the firms that I'm aware of, particularly when institutions are working with them, there is also that financial aid component to it, and really needing to get beyond your own institution to see what that price sensitivity is. And so I think that's where that value add may really come in with a firm that has that broader knowledge of the market. And sometimes you just have to get out of your own way too, because institutional thing could get pretty dangerous.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One thing you brought up, and I've always wanted to ask somebody this, so here's my chance. It's a similar kind of question. It's a big picture question. If you had to break down the college admissions landscape in terms of who the top admission person, VP of enrollment, let's say use that term, not known, it can be different terms at different schools, who they report to, how would that break down between provost, president, and somebody else?
Yeah, it's a great question. The migration has certainly been that. A lot of this will get to culture of whether it is, how decentralized an institution is. I'll give you my thought on this, and that is when I was at Columbia, I reported into a dean of students. And that was the structure at the institution, and then kind of a dotted line to the dean of the engineering school and dean of Columbia College. And so as a group, we really worked together while the central administration was certainly involved, but there was less of a central pull. At Penn, reported to the provost, president, certainly, very involved at the appropriate levels, while also still having really important relationships with the dean of the schools, having 4 undergraduate schools. So professionally, I think it is, you have your reporting lines while also you have responsibility across an institution, while you have to understand who you're most accountable to. I do think the migration, the term I was using before, is probably getting more into a centralized model through a VP of enrollment who does report, whether that P means provost or president. You're reporting into one of them, a vice provost or vice president, and I've seen both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Okay, friends, I am really excited about this. I feel like it's been a while since I've done a college spotlight. And this is a school, Temple University, I've wanted to do one on for some time. Just so you know, from 1995 to 1997, we lived in Philadelphia, 246 West Upstill Street, West Mount Airy. Karis was born in a hospital that was like right around the corner from Temple. And so, where we lived was maybe like 10, 12 miles from Temple. And so Temple is just one of these schools that's very exciting. And I regard it as a very, very much an underrated gem. And so many people want to go to college in the city. And some people want to go to college in the East. And the top 4 destinations of interest oftentimes are Boston, New York, Philly, and DC. But most of the schools in those cities are very expensive, and most of them are really hard to get into. But what Temple does is provides that city experience at about half the cost of many of the other city schools, and they have every imaginable major you could ever want to study. This is a large public research university, R1 classification, in the 6th largest city in the country. And, Philadelphia has the second highest concentration of college students. Boston only has more. But Temple is literally the only public university in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia has university on top of university. You've got UPenn, you've got Drexel, you've got St. Joe's, you've got LaSalle, you've got Thomas Jefferson, you've got University of the Arts, you've got University of the Sciences, you've got Curtis Institute of Music. You go a little bit into the suburbs, you got Villanova, Swarthmore, Bryn Mawr, Haverford, Eastern. And so schools abound all over in Philly. It's a great college town. But Temple is this really large major research university and happens to be a public school. And when I say large, there are 17 schools and colleges, including 5 professional schools. And so Temple is a place where you name it, they have it, both for undergrad, grad, and professional. And, Lisa, I wasn't going to do this because I thought it was just going to be boring for our listeners, but I don't think it will. I'm actually going to go through and touch very briefly on these 17 schools and colleges, including the 5 professional schools. So they have the Boyer College of Music and Dance. And part of the Center for Performing and Cinematic Arts at Temple is this school. And it's right in the city's historical and cultural institutions. They access all of them. And I'm talking about things like the Kimmel Center for Performing Arts, Philadelphia Orchestra, Opera Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Ballet, Philadanco, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. They take advantage of all of that in that Boyer School College of Music and Dance because all of that's close. And so there's a lot of practical education and getting out and exploring the opportunities in the city. Then you have the College of Engineering. And at Temple, this includes 5 departments: bioengineering, environmental engineering, electrical and computer engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and the Center for Engineering, Management, and Technology. And the college offers 8 undergraduate programs, BS degrees, 7 graduate programs, including both MS degrees and PhD degrees. And then you have the College of Liberal Arts. Now, the College of Liberal Arts at Temple includes 28 academic departments, 35 undergraduate majors, and another 36 minors. One of Temple's strongest programs is criminal justice, and it's housed in the College of Liberal Arts. Then you have the College of Public Health. Well, Temple's University's College of Public Health includes departments in a number of things, including epidemiology, biostatistics, communication sciences and disorders, health and rehabilitation sciences, health services administration and policy, nursing, occupational therapy, kinesiology, social and behavioral sciences, and the School of Social Work. And it's one of the largest colleges of public health in the United States, offering bachelor's, master's, and doctor's degrees, as well as certificate programs. Then we get into the College of Science and Technology. Now we're talking about things like computer and information sciences, computer science, chemistry, biology, earth and environmental science, physics, and math. Then another one strong program is the Fox School of Business. And here there are 15 undergraduate majors, 19 minors, 10 professional master's programs, and a wide variety of international partnerships. Then we get into the Klein College of Media and Communications. And so this is one of the largest and most comprehensive schools of media and communication in the country. The school has approximately 3,000 undergraduate and graduate students and over 20,000 alumni and more than 60 full-time faculty members. Did you look at Temple at all?
I looked at it, but I don't think Lily was interested in Philadelphia. She's very idiosyncratically picky about states, like no states that started with I. I don't know. Ohio somehow is terrible, even though she's never been there. I mean,
Right.
It's just, I was dealing with a very challenging situation there.
I hear you. Well, that's just got a very strong communication school.
No,
They
it's
also-
excellent.
They also have, jumping on the higher level, the Lewis Katz School of Medicine, and they were the graduates from this school were the first to remove HIV from the human cells. You've got the School of Pharmacy, and this is actually on their health science campus, and it's one of 6 pharmacy schools in Philly that confer the pharm degree, and so it confirms PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, MS Science, and degrees in pharmaceutical science. Another exciting school is the Tyler School of Art and Architecture, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that started all the way back in 1930, and, it's got an outstanding reputation, and I'll comment on that a little bit more when I get into talking about the logo and stuff. Then you have the School of Theater, Film, and Media Arts, and so this is just known as TFMA. They offer BA and BFA degrees in 13 concentrations, from musical theater to cinematography, screenwriting, theater design, and they have graduate programs in film, media arts, musical theater, acting, design, directing, playwriting, as well as master's programs in musical theater studies and a PhD in documentary arts and visual research. And it just keeps going on. They have the Beasley School of Law. I've worked with a number of students that have gone to the Beasley School of Law. In fact, some of my students that I was advisor at for 4 years ended up at the Beasley School of Law, and it's founded in 1895, and they have 860 students. That's one of the larger law schools in the country, and they train in trial advocacy, transnational law, taxation, some of the specialties, full-time, part-time programs, evening programs as well. Then there's College of Education and Human Development, another program that they have. And this was founded way back in 1919, and it's organized into 3 different departments around teaching, learning, and policy, organization and leadership studies, and psychological studies and education. And so they've long had a relationship with the city of Philadelphia at producing teachers and future educators for the city. And then you have the School of Social Work, another really well-known school. And this program offers full-time and part-time and online programs, and they have more than 600 students enrolled in the School of Social Work, which is one of the bigger schools of social work. Like 600 is pretty big, for a social work school. And then you have the School of Podiatric Medicine, and they're most known for their Foot and Ankle Institute, which is the largest medical treatment facility anywhere for a Foot and Ankle Institute. And take a guess how many patients visit the Foot and Ankle Institute.
Oh, a year?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 25,000.
40,000.
Oh, wow.
I think that's a good guess. Pretty good. I don't know what I would have guessed. But that sounds like a big number to me.
Yeah, well, my feet hurt all the time. And my parents always told me the first thing that goes is your feet. So, I mean, I'm all about the foot and ankle doctor. So,
Yeah, Nietzsche lives at the foot ankle doctors.
yeah.
And
They are
between
good
that
people.
and soaking in basins of water,
Right.
Next, we have the Kornberg School of Dentistry. Now, I got an interesting exposure to this school. So when we lived in Upsall Garden Apartments in Philadelphia, and A very next door neighbor was a dental student there at the Kornberg School of Dentistry. And so I used to talk to him at length. And one thing that I remembered him saying is, I'm going to have $300,000 of debt when I graduate. That sounded like a big number. It's still a big number.
Yeah.
But it's a really, I mean, that, by the way, that's around the national average. Last I checked, it was like 278, 278,000. Yep, 278.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a big nut. But they have nearly 700 students at the Kornberg School of Dentistry, and they've been educating dentists since 1863, making it the second oldest. Yeah, the second oldest dental school that's been in continuous operation, in the country. So, and they're known for everything from orthodontics and emergency care and implants. Then another really exciting school that they have is the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management. And so this houses the Sports Industry Research Center and also the Asia Center for Tourism and Hospitality Research. So more than 1,100 students are enrolled in this, counting graduate and undergraduate. So those are the 17 programs. And hopefully by doing that, you get a chance to see just how much of a comprehensive university this is.
Yeah.
I mentioned criminal justice as being a really strong program, and there's so many, but some of the other really strong majors would be kinesiology, sports management, radio and television, advertising, acting, cinematography and video production, hospitality and tourism, journalism, and then insurance, art, architecture, African American studies, and social work. So one other thing I want to say, and then I'm going to ask you, Lisa, what's jumping off the page so far at you? So this last thing I'll share is they offer outstanding opportunities for foreign study. So they have study abroad opportunities at their own campuses in Rome and Tokyo, which is incredible. They also have semester and summer programs in Rome, London, Japan, Dublin, Germany, France, South Africa, China, Spain, Ecuador, and Australia. They have a global internship program that offers internships in Spain, Australia, Costa Rica, China, Singapore, India, and Chile. And then they have Temple-sponsored programs that are all led by Temple faculty. And there's also one for faculty teaching that generates a boatload of applications. And the last thing I'll say is they also have a campus in Ambler, Pennsylvania. I used to drive by that all the time. And they have domestic partnerships too. So if you want to experience another part of the world, but not necessarily overseas, they have a partnership in Los Angeles where film students go, and they have a partnership in Washington, D.C. where political science students go. So what's jumping out so far for you, Lisa?
Well, it just seems like, if you can't find something you like to study at that school, like you're not trying very hard. Because I'm blown away by the diversity of majors that they have. It's really hard, I think, for schools to be so good at a lot of things, but it sounds like Temple has really managed to do it. And that's, it's such a blessing for the kids who go there. They have so many choices.
And especially because there's so many kids that want to be in the city. And like I said, they either can't afford it, or in some cases, like if you look at a lot of the schools in Boston inner city, a lot of them are really, really, really hard to get in.
Yes.
It's hard getting in Tufts. It's hard getting in Boston College. It's hard getting in Northeastern. It's hard getting in Harvard. It's hard getting in Wellesley. It's hard getting in BU, NBC. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Like these are highly selective schools, and you've got a school at Temple that's moderately selective, but it's not uber selective. And then it's at a fraction of the price too. So those are some of the things that are exciting about it. And it is definitely a place where you'll feel the pulse of the city. Like it's self-contained campus. And by the way, one big change from when I was there is how much money they have invested into that campus. North Philadelphia is known to be a pretty rough part of the city. And they have done such a good job of sort of walling the campus off in a way to, produce that feeling of safety and making it feel so much more self-contained than it ever felt when I was there in the mid 90s. So some of the overlaps for Temple are, as you would expect, it's a public school from Pennsylvania. So it's a lot of Pennsylvania schools: Drexel, Bloomsburg, St. Joe's, Westchester, Scranton, LaSalle, University of Pittsburgh, Indiana, University of PA, and Penn State are all huge overlaps, all Pennsylvania schools. Interesting history. So it's founded in 1884 by Russell Conwell, and he's as a local minister, and he's approached by some blue collar workers who said, I want to go to college, but I can't leave my day job. So he was known as this really gifted teacher. So he starts out tutoring one of them, and then his tutoring practice grows. It goes up to 4, then 6, then 8, then 10, then 12. And then all of a sudden the idea starts like, we need a university that can sort of reach the common man. And that's how Temple was birthed. So kind of an interesting history. A little bit about the admission process. So they have two different ways of applying. Either apply early action with a November 1st deadline, and then you'll find out by January 10th at the latest. Or you'll apply regular admission, which has a February 1st deadline. And they function kind of more like rolling, though. It's not one design notification date. They'll promise you over 4 to 8 weeks you'll hear from them if you get it in by February 1st. You can expect notification within 4 to 8 weeks. They exclusively use the Common App for everything. So no app on their own, no coalition. They just one app, keep it simple. And they were the first large public school to go test optional. So I remember when they went test optional, it was a big deal because at the time, it was 2015 when they went test optional. At the time, so many of the selective liberal arts and moderately selective liberal arts schools, but you weren't finding big national schools go test optional. Now look at it. I mean, you've got, your Arizona States, and then you've got your all your main schools on the West Coast in Oregon, Washington, and California are test optional or test blind. So they were a real leader on that. And it was a really big deal when they went test optional in 2015. So they're not just test optional only because of the pandemic. And one thing I love is some schools are test optional, but when it comes to merit scholarships, they're looking at test scores. No, all their scholarships, their honors college, all of that does not involve test scores. So they're kind of consistent. They kind of walk the walk. Sometimes people say we're test optional, but then if you want merit scholarship money, you need test scores. You want to get in the honors college, you need test scores, and that's not how they roll. A few more things about applying to Temple. It's really, really important that after you submit your common application, you're going to immediately get an email from asking you to set up your TA portal. It's extremely important you pay attention to this because your application is not complete until you upload your transcript, and they don't want schools sending off official transcripts. They want you to go in just like the UCs do. And you go in and you get a copy of your transcript, and you upload everything into the TA portal. And that's their primary way they're going to communicate with you. And that's what many schools do. And that's in a growing trend. Learn that portal because that's the way you communicate with schools. And especially in this case, because you got to upload your transcript. So a couple other things to talk about their application process. They will allow two recommendations. Actually, it doesn't have to be both teacher. It could be a teacher. It could be someone who knows you really well. But they do allow two teacher recommendations. They do require the personal statement. That's really important in their process. And when it comes to merit scholarship money, the merit scholarships range from $1,000 to full tuition. And one thing I love I love when schools do this, you do not have a separate application. So your admission application is your scholarship application. Another initiative they launched that I really liked a lot, this one was launched in 2014. They call it Fly in 4. And basically the way this works is Temple says if you do 3 things, and if you don't graduate in 4 years, then you can come back for the 5th year and you will pay 0 for tuition. So I think that's pretty cool. And what are the 3 things? They're pretty reasonable. You have to meet with your academic advisor at least once every semester. You need to stay in good academic standing, and you need to register for your classes on time. That is not too much of an ask. And since they've launched this, their graduation rate has really gone up significantly. So that's a pretty cool initiative.
I was going to ask if it made a difference, and I bet
huge
it really
difference.
Has. Yeah.
And so I love that plan. Another thing, if you're someone who wants to not be confined to campus, but you're not going to have a car, not a big deal. At Temple, you've got public transportation right at the tip of your fingers there. You've got the SEPTA subway and the regional rails. So you can get right to 30th Street, and from 30th Street, you can shoot all over the place. You can shoot to D.C., which is a little less than 2.5 hours away. Baltimore, about 2 hours away. New York City, 2 hours away. And then all the other areas throughout Pennsylvania and really up the East Coast if you want, because that ties into the Amtrak system at 30th Street. A few traditions. Let's go over a couple traditions they have. One of them is the cherry and white, which are the official school colors of Temple. And they were actually the first school in the nation to use cherry as one of its colors. Little fun fact. The only other large university that uses cherry is the University of New Mexico. And the only other school that has cherry and white is Rensselaer Polytech in Troy, New York. So the cherry and white. The other thing is the Temple T. And you'll see that Temple T everywhere. Big, giant T. And it was designed by students in the Tyler School of Art and Architecture in 1983. The interesting thing about the T, they say it represents positive character and strength. But the idea, when you think of a T, you think about like the open part of the T, Lisa, let me picture it. So that, I think this is clever. That stands for the fact that Temple is all about the free exchange of ideas. So that's what the T represents, which I think is pretty cool. And at all the sporting events, they're constantly, T for Temple. Temple is a big part of the cheering there. Another thing about Temple is the owl. You got to know the owl. So the owl's, first of all, it's the mascot. And it's been the mascot since it was founded in the 80s. So this is a long-standing mascot. They're the first school ever to adopt the owl as their mascot. And the reason for it, once again, is clever. The nocturnal hunter, the owl, symbolizes Temple's early mission as a night school for ambitious young people of limited means.
Very, very good. Very nice symbolism there.
Isn't that cool? So, So Russell Conwell, he encouraged these students. He used to say all the time to them, the owl of the night makes the eagle of the day. There you go. And then they upped their game in 2010 because they introduced Stella, which is the live owl.
They have a live owl.
Yeah, the live owl that comes out to the sporting events. And this live owl, it arrived in Pennsylvania from Washington State in 2011. It's stored at Elmwood Park Zoo in Norristown, PA. And it's one of two live. One, yes. Yeah. Stella. Her name is Stella.
Yeah.
Stella is one of two live owl mascots in Division I. Fun fact, the only other school, Florida Atlantic University. All right. And then the last thing I'll say is about their athletics. So they participate in the American Athletic Conference, which is kind of weird for me because I've always known them to be in the A10, but they had been in the A10, the Atlantic 10, for 31 years, and they moved pretty recently to the American Athletic Conference. And they still like field hockey and lacrosse, play in the Big East. And they're a big part of what's known as the Philadelphia Big Five. Anyone in Philly knows about the Big Five. And these are all the Philly schools that have rivalry games with each other. And people just come out and just pack the stands. There's a lot of history there. Now, last week, when I shared my recommended resource for you, I shared a part of the poll that Niche does, where they say what one word or phrase best describes your school. So I'm going to start including that in my spotlight. So for Temple, they surveyed 282 people, and the number one response was diverse, which it is. You'll see when I share some of the stats with you. After that, it was research. Then it was up and coming. And then after that, it was energetic and fun. So those are all the words that students use to describe Temple. So the last thing I have here, Lisa, is the stats, and then I'll ask you for some final commentary. Over 150 undergraduate majors, over 600 programs, 29 students is the average class size. They have over 1/3 of a million alumni all over the world. So that's a huge network, 1/3 of a million. In fact, 150,000 alone in Philly. Now, one thing I will be honest, I don't like about Pennsylvania schools, public schools, is Pennsylvania is not a state that generously supports its higher ed. So I've worked with students over the years that come from modest means, and they're staying in their own in-state school and doing residential is oftentimes not an option for them. They have to be commuters.
Mm-hmm.
I know Penn State has certain programs that are over $23,000 for in-state. And Temple's pretty pricey in-state, but it's more of a bargain out-of-state. And remember, they have differential tuition, which I'll be completely honest with you, I hate differential tuition. I find it's confusing to have so many different tuition rates for different majors. So here are some of their highest priced programs. If you're getting a BFA as a fine arts major at Temple, these are the 21-22 tuition prices. In-state's going to hit you, this is just tuition, for $23,208, and out-of-state, $38,496. But if you're in the College of Liberal Arts, in-state is $16,408, and out-of-state, $29,712. So you're talking about almost a $7,000 difference for in-state and a $9,000 difference for out-of-state, just depending on what your major is. And they not only have different prices for their 12 undergraduate colleges, but within their colleges, they have different prices. So, for example, within public health and social work have very different prices. Within the Tyler School of Art, fine arts and architecture have different tuitions. And those are just two of many examples. I really wish they would jettison this and go with something more simple and more user-friendly. And I'm probably also just a little salty about the fact that their in-state tuition is so high. I've worked with many Pennsylvania in-state students that were under-resourced or moderately resourced, and they just can't afford to stay on campus without significant loans unless they get substantial scholarship money. So to put things in perspective, tuition in some majors is higher than the cost of attendance at a place like UF, University of Florida in Gainesville, where tuition is under $6,500 for in-state for 21-22, and cost of attendance in-state is under $21,000 for all expenses, living expenses, room and board, student fees, books, transportation, personal, miscellaneous, healthcare, everything. So maybe that's one reason why I'm a little salty on differential equation when the rates are so high. But out of state, it continues to be a bargain. So in-state tuition is basically right at $20,000 for in-state. That's pretty high for in-state tuition. Like, that's not much of a break you're getting. You know, I know in places like Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, you know, you're talking 8, 9, 10,000, you know, for in-state tuition. Out-of-state tuition, $33,482. So there's not much of a difference there. Cost of attendance, in-state, $33,490, out-of-state, $47. So out-of-state is a pretty good bargain. In-state, it kind of is what it is. Pennsylvania schools are just very high for if you're going to live on campus. Some more stats. 54% women, 45% men, 28,674 undergrads, 9,879 grad students, 60% acceptance rate, average GPA 3.54, math test scores, middle 50%, 550 to 660, middle 50% evidence-based reading and writing, 570 to 660, ACT 24 to 30, middle 50. 18% of students live on campus. And here's your sort of racial ethnic diversity. You can see it's a pretty diverse school. So 58.6% of students would be white, 13.7 black, 13% Asian, 8.2 Hispanic or Latino, and then 5.2% international. So pretty diverse, and then 4% multicultural, multiracial. So pretty diverse school there. Racial, ethnically, not a big sorority school. 3% of women in sororities, 2% of men in sororities. 89% freshman retention. 4-year grad rate 52.2. 6-year grad rate 74%. And you got to look at grad rates through the context of the population. They have a large Pell percentage that they take. You know, they've always been committed to, you know, not sort of being hoity-toity and elitist and trying to serve the common man. 13.9% of freshmen that had no financial need got merit aid. So about 1 out of 7 students that has no financial need gets merit aid. Average award is around $7,000. And so that's Temple. Elisa, any other comments or thoughts?
Well, you know, it sounds like a very exciting place where there's a big diversity of majors. If you're into like a big school with an urban environment and lots of different choices, it sounds like it could be a great program. I was wondering how they do in terms of meeting need for their in-state students, if they get gapped or if they tend to meet most of their need.
Yeah, 63% of need is met. So there's just only 77 schools in the country meet need. So it's under 3% of your 4-year colleges. They tend to be quite wealthy. It takes a lot of money to meet need. I know that both Miami and Tulane are trying really, really hard. They're like 96%, of meeting need. And there's this huge initiatives. And those are some of the wealthier schools.
Mm-hmm.
in the country. And so they're going to package you with loans and package you with work. And, for some people, paying 47 is a lot better than paying 82.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I guess for everybody it's better than paying 82.
Yeah,
I just realized I didn't make a very profound statement there, Lisa.
If you really like paying a lot of money, you just like that. That's something that makes you feel good. And some people do. Then by all means, go for the 82, right?
I think those people would rather give the charitable gift and get the donation.
Sure. The other question that I had was kind of alluding to the conversation that we had in the question section was about safety.
Yes.
Because that's the thing that I've heard about Temple. The word on the street is that the neighborhood is kind of rough. And so that's something that people need to be aware of when they make a decision to go there.
Yeah. So that's, you know how it is. Like, it's hard for old stereotypes to die. And when I was in Philly, that was the rap on Temple. But they have put so much effort and energy, not only to a complete campus overhaul, but making the school more safe. And then also just the commitment of the police and security guards. I mean, it's a place, the students that are there feel like it's safe. And they never used to feel that way when I lived in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everybody's got a different tolerance for sort of urbanness, and like some people, when I work with students, sometimes they'll say, you know what, I didn't like that school. I stepped off campus and I saw somebody homeless. You know what I mean? Like it's a city, and you know what city schools are like. You're gonna see an eclectic mixture of people when you set out, step off campus. And when you step off, you're right there. You're right in the middle of North Philly. But it still feels like a bubble inside the campus.
Gotcha.
And so I think that I've learned that some people that just thrive off that city energy, and there's others that you couldn't pay them to go.
It's true. Yeah, I guess I'm biased. I went to school at the University of Chicago in the late 80s, and it wasn't the safest neighborhood. And definitely coming from rural Missouri, that was a bit of a shock. But
You're here.
I survived. I feel so much more comfortable now in urban environments. I feel like I can kind of tell it's a neighborhood's maybe just not the richest neighborhood versus the neighborhood that's dangerous. And it's given me a lot of comfort. So when I've traveled all over the world, that's a skill that I took with me. So I always say that people should live in a city for at least a year. And I think if you're going to live near sort of a rougher neighborhood, being in the context of the university is about the safest way you can go, because universities really do try very hard to have a lot of security and, equipment and communication to protect their students. So it's kind of good training wheels with that, I think.
Yeah. And you're really close. You're really close. You're close to the historic district too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a very historic city. I didn't get into talking too much about Philly, but if you're someone who eats and breathes that sometimes I'll talk to, I'll have students, they'll say this on my questionnaire. They'll tell me, I want public transportation, and if you're the kind of person that likes to hop on a subway and go around and explore the city, go down, and there's so much stuff in Philadelphia, Franklin Institute, there's so much to do, then you probably will love this place.
Right. Right.
If you're someone that would just prefer, I mean, I find this is one of the biggest things that people have a gut level reaction to is, it's either for you or it's not for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's great. That's why we have different schools out there.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like a great place for people who like urban, who like lots of stimulation, who like diversity, who like lots of choices of things to study.
Yeah. And there's some really good programs that you don't find at many schools, some of the things they're doing with cinematography, documentary production, film, TV, and all that. Those are kinds of things that there's not hundreds of schools offering that kind of thing.
Absolutely not. No.
So they've got some niches. So there's another one for our list. Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, my pleasure.
Next week in the news, we're looking at an article that looks at edX, the massive open online course provider, being acquired by 2U. And what does that mean for you? Our question from a listener looks at 3-2 programs. What are 3-2 programs? How do you apply? And are they a good thing or a bad thing? Our interview is first part of 3 with Eric Furta, is he'll take questions and answers about applying to highly selective universities. And our college spotlight goes to Spokane, Washington for a look at Gonzaga University. See you next week. And that's our show. A big thank you
to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.